With Unity installed, we're now ready to take a look at the Unity editor. And to do that, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new project. Okay. So click on the new project. And you get a list of the templates. 3D is by default the one that is selected because, well, 3D is sexy. Everybody wants to create 3D applications and such. There's a lot of other templates that are available, and there will be more or less templates as time goes on. Later on in the course series, I will actually show you how to create your own template. But in the meantime, what we're going to start with is the 2D core template. And the reason is that it's similar to what you've already been using more than likely. And so we'll be able to come up on some of the interesting features of Unity without having to deal with the added complexity of dealing with 3D stuff. And then once we're there, then we can switch over and start working with 3D and some of the other features that are available in Unity. So we're going to create a 2D, and really all we need to do is give it a name. So, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't matter. So I'm just going to call this one Beginner, and we'll create the project. And this will take a little bit of time now because what it's going to do, I forgot to mention, and it's already started. I also selected by default a older version of the Unity editor. At the time you create it, you can tell it which version of the Unity editor you want it to use. And I did not do that. It's picking an older one, which will be good because I did promise that I would show what happens when you try and update a project to a different version of the Unity editor. So it's going to take a few minutes. As you can see, it's already been busy for a few seconds as it is loading a lot of stuff. And so I will come back when it is done. And now we're back. You may have noticed before we paused that the Unity editor that we had recently installed was an icon in the upper corner of the screen. You can enter the editor directly, but when you're working on a project, you usually want to go through the Unity Hub, click on the project, which will open the proper editor for you with all the assets and files and such for your project available. So generally that icon, nice to have. I move it somewhere out of the way so that I'm not ever tempted to click on it, and I do all my work through the hub. And I would suggest you do it as well. Okay, so you can see it's kind of a big screen. I like to have a big open window here for all the parts of this because it gets a bit cramped if you window this and size it down some. So what you really have here, starting over here where the cursor is on the left, is the main scene of your project. And your projects are organized by scenes, so there will always be at least one scene. And the default is sample scene, but you can rename that. Any assets, anything that you have going on into this scene, into this game, are actually going to show up here. Okay, and right now, all there is in the scene is a main camera. Okay. The blue area is a viewport into the visual stuff that you have already designed. And as you can see right now, it's pretty much empty. And there's also a game view, which the scene view is, the actual components. So right now there's just a camera. And because this is 2D, it's a look down camera. So it's looking down into that rectangle. That rectangle is the size of the blue screen that you saw in the game. So that's basically everything that can be seen in the game. If you were making like a side scroller or something, this would be your side scroller would be a little bit larger, you would move the camera along the side scroll, and you would usually have cut scenes from one scene to another, so that as you reach the edge of one, it would cut to the next scene, and the camera would pick up and move along to the next scene and such. So you build something like a side scroller, one scene at a time. If this is some other kind of game, like a board game, your entire board might be there, or this might just be a view of a portion of the board, that type of thing. So just the basics of what this scene looks like. And because the kind of thing I'm going to do here, I'm going to do everything right here in this view window. So I'm happy to stay on the game. By the way, if you click play, the game actually starts running, but right now it wouldn't do anything because there's nothing there. And so it would just stay just like it is. But we'll see how that play works out later. Okay. So this is the main pieces of it. Okay. And then down here, you have your assets organizer. And right now, all there is in the assets is the screen, is the sample scene itself, okay, which is already up here. So there's more than one way to get at some of these assets. But all your assets are going to go here. Things like scripts and images and everything else will show up as an asset. And as a matter of fact, a lot of people like to come in here and right click. By the way, you can right click in any area and get a context sensitive menu. And so if I right click here, I can create a folder, and that folder will be for scripts. And I could create more folders for the typical kinds of assets that I will have for my particular game. In this case, scripts, almost always you have scripts. We'll talk about other assets as we come across them. And notice that it now shows up over here. Okay. And there's also, aside from assets, there's packages. And these are the basic ones that come with Unity. So 2D animations, 2D common, 2D path, pixel, importer, spline, tile map, JetBrains editor, math, Newtonsoft, all kinds of things that you can learn about piece by piece. And we'll see some of them as we go along. But mainly, this is where I said in the introduction that some of this learning is up to you. Once you see how this works, then you should be able to pick up any of these assets that would be useful for you and figure out how they work, or find the resources to figure out how they work. Okay. All right. So we've covered the main part of it, but then we have this one over here, which is the inspector. And the inspector generally shows you the components and what goes on with them. So I just clicked on the main camera, and it's named main camera. Its tag is a main camera. We could talk about tags at another point. It has a transform, which is its position in 3 dimensions. Even though this is a 2D game we're doing, all 3 dimensions are still represented. Rotation in 3 dimensions, and scale. So I can scale my camera view. If I have an object in here, I can scale that object in the same way. Pretty much every object has a transform. Okay. And then this one also has a camera component that has various fields that we don't even need to program for. We can set them in here. So notice the background is that blue color. I could change the background color here. Okay. Easily enough by picking some other color. And I can even come in here and pick use the color wheel to pick a color. Say I want green background. Oh, come on now. Okay. And let's see. I want to move this over to there to make it green. That's kind of bright. Let's make it a little less bright. All right. And then once I've selected that, so a lot of work on the basics of your objects. And remember, this is a very object-oriented design methodology. So these objects can be dealt with by just pointing and clicking without writing a single line of code. These are built in. So the camera is not something that you code, it's a built-in. And so it has these features that are already set up for you to pick on if you want to. Okay. If you're going to do audio, there's an audio listener in here. And if you want to turn off audio, and there's no reason to or not to at this point, but if you want to turn off audio, unclicking that disables it. Same thing if I wanted to turn off the camera, unclicking it disables it. If I wanted to turn off the whole composite object, I can unclick that checkbox and it will disappear. We'll also see ways to do that by a program, but right now this is just the basic setup of how we look at components and how we deal with things. Now, 3 different ways. So this is the important part of this particular lecture. 3 different ways to add a component to your system. First of all, if a component is going to be part of another component, like the main camera, you can do add component. And then search for some kind of string that says what kind of component it is you want. We'll see more of that later. You can also right-click. Excuse me, I said 3 ways. There's going to be 4 ways. You can right-click in here and add certain things. GUI skins, TextMesh Pro, 2D, sprites, palette, physics material, all kinds of things that we haven't talked about yet, but they're there, including C# scripts. We can also right-click instead of in the assets thing. We can click in the scene hierarchy and create an empty game object. We can create, again, 2D sprites, physics, tile map, so on and so forth. All these things we can create. Okay. There's another way. We can go up here to game object and say, oh, create an empty game object, create an empty child object, 2D object. Gee, that's looking awfully familiar. So there's more than one way of creating the objects that you want to do. And that's where we're going to pick up with in the next video, is we're actually going to add some objects to this project. See you then.